For the third time in 5 weeks, Dearborn residents are taking to social media with a flood of concerns about their flooded basements after what seems like an unusual pattern of heavy rains over these past 6 weeks. Some of the posts focus attention, rage even, on city government. Some Dearborn residents feel that city government should have been better prepared to avoid all this flooding, and better equipped to respond faster if or when it did happen. With an important mayoral election on Dearborn ballots this year, city infrastructure may now be a key issue. But voters' memories tend to be short, and once the summer rains and the flooded basements have dried, it might be easier for voters to just be distracted by whatever the next crisis is. What if the pandemic gets worse again, or God forbid, there's a school shooting in Dearborn? What if the abundance of new restaurants along Michigan Avenue, one about every 650 feet for over 2 miles, starts to board up their windows again like they did in the last exodus from Dearborn's Main Street during the mortgage crisis and the banking collapse? Remember that? If those things happen, the curbs full of wet carpeting and discarded sofas will likely be forgotten as Dearborn voters go to the ballots again, driven by whatever the hot point issue happens to be during the week before the election. That's politics in the age of social media. But let's think about this. What if we refocused on what the role of city government should be at its most fundamental level? What is a city government's order of priorities actually supposed to be anyway? And what are the things the city council and the mayor's office ought to have at the very top of their agenda? Let me make a few observations, and I want to make one suggestion. Firstly, as we continue to discover from flooded basements problems with local law and traffic enforcement, a downtown area that booms and busts with every automotive recession, and the effects those things will inevitably exert on our property values, maybe we need to refocus on the basics of city government. We've got a new logo for our downtown restaurant district. We've got new bike lanes on the heels of a failed bike share program, a new pool house at Levagood with towering glass windows and an architecturally stylistic facade. But the new logo for the downtown restaurant area didn't keep the city from having the highest COVID-19 infection rates in the state. And anyone with common sense is not going to ride a bike in the new bike lanes because of drivers rolling stop signs and breaking speed limits in Dearborn. And while the new pool house at Levagood is really very beautiful, I think homeowners are more concerned with the new swimming pools in their basements. So what should city government really be focusing on, and what should they just let go? How about we start with the basics? Local law enforcement, including traffic enforcement like speed limits on Telegraph on Friday nights and stop signs around parks and schools. Why don't we start there? How about prioritizing relief efforts in advance of flood crises? Because as every longtime Dearborn resident knows, we live in the natural floodplain of the Rouge River Basin. So as we've relearned this summer, a once-a-century flood happens about once a year in Dearborn. This year, it's happened 3 times already. So how about when we vote this election, we think about what the real role of city government ought to be? How about we think of the cake and not just the icing? And lastly, let's not fall for that popular old political two-step that goes something like this. Well, that money isn't for this, it's earmarked for something else. Here's how it's worked in Dearborn in the past. City government spends time and effort to raise money to redesign a logo for the downtown West Dearborn Business District. Remember that one? They spend big money designing a new logo that was collected from businesses right in that district expressly for the purpose of marketing. Suddenly, the sovereign currency used to fund that logo design becomes exclusive to that project, and local city government can hide behind the "that money isn't for that" reasoning when residents need the money for flooded basements and better traffic enforcement. The "that money isn't for that" and "that's a separate budget" is the oldest political trick in the book. It's even older than a bunch of incumbent politicians promising to solve the problems they helped create if you just give them a little more money and one more term.